probably based on perception too. Like that could be a big thing to one person and maybe not as big as a thing to another person. But I'm not the expert here. You are the expert. And so I want to hear your story. And, you know, you haven't written just one book on this. You've written now 2 books on this. And I don't think somebody writes 2 books on a very specific topic unless they have a story themselves. So I would love for you to share with the listeners, you know, why does this mean so much to you?
You know, it's interesting the way you even frame it, because as a positive psychology person, you're already sort of a step ahead, because we can choose to be incredibly unhappy, and we can choose to hurt other people, and we can choose to play out what was done to us when we were growing up and we didn't have power. Or we can choose not to hurt other people. We can choose to unpack what happened to us in ways that help us actually be happier, healthier, more engaged with other people, more joyful. And so for me, when I got pulled into a situation where it kind of blew up everything I believed and everything I thought and the way I'd been raised and the cultural conditioning we all go through, because we've all been taught, oh, bullying is bad and children are bullies and children shouldn't do that. We have zero tolerance for it. It's terrible. You know, we've gotten to a point in society where we've created a new word now called bullycide. And it's for these children that are so badly treated by their peers that they just want to escape. Mm-hmm. And they take their own lives. And yeah, it's a really uncomfortable topic and people don't want to talk about it, but it's actually really important. What I learned in my own situation was adults teach bullying to children. They role model it and then they tell them not to do it. And this is one of the ways in which we can blow up kids' mental health and blow up their happiness, because it creates a lot of confusion. Kids can turn on the internet, the TV, whatever their media is, and watch adults in positions of like the most prestigious, most powerful positions in the world, and they're blatantly bullying people publicly. They're not being held to account for it at all. And at the same time that that's happening in the adult world, we're creating more stringent laws for children who bully. So what I learned was, what happened in my story was the bullies were not children, they were teachers. And that's where I began recognizing that the system itself is completely broken and we need to build something new. And that's what's really exciting in my work, is because I think if we build out with brain knowledge and neuroscientific research and psychology research, we can change this whole system and fix it.
So you were bullied by a teacher?
No, the teachers were bullying children in the school that I worked at. So it was my colleagues, and children were reporting, teenagers were reporting, oh, you know, we're being called all these homophobic slurs, we're being sworn at, we're being thrown against the wall, we're being detained when we try to get away from we're yelling in the face, we're being publicly humiliated and shamed. It's like, oh, really? And what's fascinating about it is, I mean, what I've learned in the research, this is textbook, but when it happens to you in your life, it's a shock. These teachers have a split personality. So every time I saw them, my colleagues, they were intelligent and charming and nice and self-regulated. They weren't screaming and yelling and humiliating people and using homophobic slurs and swearing. So I was like, you know, it's the classic Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Well, once you do the research into the brain science, this is a typical presentation and it can be seen on a brain scan. These people present that way because they can't help it, basically. They're not choosing happiness, let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's like this very vicious cycle of mental illness, right? So like they may have some sort of mental illness or something that they're dealing with, and then they act in a certain way. And now those children or teenagers now may also have future or current mental illness. So it's like this really vicious cycle. Wow. So is it kind of a case or sometimes was it a case of like a he said, she said moment?
Not really, because there were at least 14 students reporting identical behaviors.
Got it.
And they were, many of them didn't even know each other. Some were in second year university all the way down to grade 10. I mean, and when you get a presentation like that, of course the teachers denied it. And what's also fascinating too is what happens in these bullying scenarios is children normalize the behavior that's being done to them by powerful adults. So if you have two adults, two teachers working together, and they're abusive, one of them is screaming and yelling and shaming, and the other stands silent. The teenagers go, oh, maybe the fault lies with me, because the adult would intervene if this was bullying. The adult would stop this happening if this was psychological abuse. And if it was hurting me, I mean, if I'm feeling hurt, if I'm feeling crazy, it's probably my own fault. I'm weak, or I'm sensitive, or I'm one of the homophobic slurs they're calling me. So really, it's when you talk about infection and you talk about mental illness, that's the perfect word to use. And the people that are doing that are hurt people. And you can see on a brain scan that they have damaged brains. It's just that our society never talks about the brain. We act like it doesn't exist, which is one of the craziest things, because what happens in the brain is those kids, as you were just describing, they're not using their brains for happiness. Their brains are not focused on social emotional learning. Their brains aren't focused on problem solving or creativity or skill development. Their brains are hyper laser focused on the threat. And the threat is the yelling and the screaming and the humiliating. So those brains are not able to develop in healthy, happy ways. And, we have rampant youth mental illness right now. So I think as adults, we kind of have to look in the mirror and say, surely we can do better. And I believe we can. And that's the inspiring, exciting part of the book. It's really very empowering once you learn about your own brain, because as you say, a lot of your conduct and a lot of your feelings become choices.